giving up that sense of identity and that rigid sense of who I thought I was just allowed for unfolding an exponential possibility as a result.
That was Adam Gibson, and you're listening to The Regenerative Journey.
Here at The Regenerative Journey, we know that good health is related to good food and good practices, but understand that sometimes the right food choices are quite hard to put into place. But our good buddy, Cindy O'Meara at the Nutrition Academy, is helping people break old habits to create a much healthier lifestyle. So in support of what she's doing, we're offering a $100 discount to all our listeners. Simply enrol in their functional nutrition course and enter the coupon Charlie100, that's Charlie100. The Nutrition Academy, say goodbye to old food habits and hello to a much healthier, happier life.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and internationally, and their continuing connection to country, culture, community, land, sea and sky. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to The Regenerative Journey with your host, Charlie Arnott.
Quick plug for our workshops coming up in December. The first one is at the farm at Byron Bay in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales on the 2nd and 3rd of December. And then our next one is the next week, 7th and 8th of December at Hannah here at Burrawa in the Southwest Slopes of New South Wales. It's our 2-day Introduction to Biodynamics course. Theory in the morning, practical in the afternoon. It's 2 days. Jump on charliearnott.com.au, the events page there, to book your tickets. Sneak these workshops in before the end of the year, before the festive season, and hope to see you there. G'day, welcome back for part 2 of Adam Gibson's Regenerative Journey interview. This one we talk more about regenerative agriculture, fear, how to overcome fear and transitioning to regenerative agriculture, and his Adam's mentoring program and other little initiatives that he's engaged in and projects in the regenerative agriculture space. Very exciting stuff, and thrilled we got to sit there for so long and had to turn it into 2 parts because it's all absolutely awesome. And here you go. Here's another episode, part 2 of Adam Gibson on the Regenerative Journey. I want to pick up on something you just said then before, Adam, the fragility of our food system. Do you reckon, do you think was that set up on purpose, or was that just the way it's happened?
I don't know. I think on purpose insofar as...
It's a Tony Robbinsism. If you did know, what would you say?
Look, I think it's on purpose insofar as he who controls the supplier controls the money. You know, so it's the industrial model which is really driving that. Here's the kids home from school. Cool. Yeah, so that's, I think it's on purpose so far as, you know, if we're reliant, then they control it and therefore someone's profiting, you know, so I think that's very much on purpose. But, you know, I think when people realise when the toilet paper ran out, people carried on about it, but it probably gave everyone pause to think, well, hang on, if the toilet paper runs out, so can the food. Yeah. You know, and therefore it suddenly became a lot more relevant and you know, impacted us all immediately. You know, hang on. Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, there was actually a surge, wasn't there? You couldn't buy seedlings at Bunnings and you couldned...
couldn't buy a backyard chicken.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't. So there was a real surge in that. Do you think that's maintained, or everyone just got, actually I panicked a bit and I ate the chickens, or I couldn't be bothered anymore, or, you know, they've gone back to, you know, they sort of, you know, is the frog getting boiled slowly?
I think it's probably eased off, to be fair. But what I've noticed, one of the areas we're working in, mate, is putting investment into farming, into regen farming. So we work with a program called Cultivate Farms, and we match up young, or not even young, but aspiring or expanding farmers who are getting into regen and want to get into farming, and they might be on a farm already but want to go and grow and expand. And we match them with investors who want to get into the food system. And what I'm pointing that out I guess it's a plug, but the appetite for investing in that space, so that sentiment's filtered up to the investors who are now going, let's go and put some money into this because it's a solid investment. I mean, we don't get sick of food, it's kind of important for us every 3 or 4 times a day. So it's a good, solid place to invest in terms of it's a real estate asset, and guess what? It's producing something that people aren't going to get fed up with and sick of it. So that's what I've noticed is it's actually become more of a mainstream thing. People accept that a regenerative food system is a universally good idea. And to the extent that I've got people coming out, getting out of, I had a bloke ring me 2 days ago, he's getting out of the US bond market or something. He said, that could all disappear in a heartbeat. He said, where can you put $6 million? I want to get into a farm. What do you got for me?
They're
trying to find hard assets,
They're the kind of phone calls you want, aren't they?
Yeah, and that used to be, never got anything like that. It was like, not, I got a lot of knocked on a lot of doors, kissed a lot of frogs, got nowhere for a long time with it. Now they're coming at us. It's so that idea and that awareness we all had when we rushed off and buy seed at Bunnings and plant your veggie garden and all that, that's now become far more ingrained at an institutional level, I think. Is my personal assessment of it.
And are those who are looking to invest in farms, are they looking for? Obviously you're attracting those who a particular type of investor, and they want to be a regenerative farm because they can sort of be a corporate. They can invest in other more corporate conventional funds and that sort of thing. There's plenty of them around. What's their motivation? Is it the food? Is it the environment? Is it the fluffy feel good? What's
There's definitely an impact focus. Most of them have an impact profile, so that is they want to see their money doing some good in the world. So that's arguably another impact of the whole COVID thing. Is they think, hang on, am I doing the right thing in the world? There's something there. I think maybe that's not universal by any stretch, but that is it's a theme. But there's also there's genuine desire. There is a lifestyle element to some of them, but not all, where they say, look, I want to get out and I can take my family out to the farm a few times a year. I know I'm sick, I'm locked in the city, but I'm probably not going to travel overseas for some time to come, but I can go and visit my farm, so there's that. But there's also, emerging markets in carbon. There's emerging markets in biodiversity credits. There's some strong investment reasons to get involved in the space. And they don't always apply at different levels of farming, but collectively there's a whole bunch of reasons. And look, ultimately, excuse me, it's as an asset, farms are outperforming across the country. They're outperforming residential real estate in terms of the capital growth.
Oh, totally. It's
right?
Bananas.
So anyone knows that. If you're trying to buy land at the moment, it's pretty tough. Totally. So it's going nuts. Commodity prices aren't going backwards in a hurry. We're trying to, food, as you said, is always going to be in fashion. And you're in a high-performing asset. You just need management and people out there to run it, which is where the cultivate model comes in.
Geez, that's bloody picked up.
Yeah. Coming from the east as well.
It is. Maybe that settles down a bit. Come on, big guy, just put a lid on that for a minute. What's in the recipe of people, money, land, and I guess skill sets belong to people, so that's probably a part of the people part of the puzzle. I'm trying to think what else. What's the sort of the hardest one to not so much get right, but what's the most elusive part of that puzzle to come together? What is maybe the most important bit as you see it?
I think it's the talent.
As a chef who's putting all these ingredients together.
No, it's a good one. It's an intersection of having the technology or the methodology to improve land. So a lot of this is about where I see regenerative. Look, there's the talent and the technology, to use another T, and then there's the impact considerations. So and that's biodiversity, environment, and so on. But this is if you got the technology or the methodology, then an opportunity in regeneration that I see personally, and it's a longer burn thing. So I'm not saying this is a quick and easy fix, but it's a remediation technique. Yeah. So it's almost like I've done this a few times in residential property. I'll buy a crappy old Queenslander, tart it up, spend a bit of time and money and give it a bit of love, put it back on the market, make some money, or keep it and it goes up in value. And I think that's what regeneration offers farming, is that you can buy degraded, rundown, overgrazed country, it's been flogged to death, you can actually bring it back and increase its value and a lot of the farmers I work with now, that's the only way they can get in and justify buying at such a high price. It's very high price per acre, but I can improve its value dramatically over the next 3 years by doing this, that and the other.
And having a line of sight to techniques and practices and principles to improve it, I mean, there's improve and different sort of versions or perspectives on what does improved property look like. For some conventional farmers, improvement would be, we'll put more of that grass into crop and that sort of thing. But I'm talking about sort of, I guess, in the field we're working in, you know, working from a very low base of, other farmers might go, oh my God, that's run down. Like, why would you put money into that?
Yeah.
There's you got less competition often for those blocks of land.
Absolutely.
In some ways.
Yeah. Often they're the only ones left.
And then having the vision, and as you talked about earlier, Adam, about the potential, seeing the potential in there, and seeing not just the I can grow more wheat and run more sheep potential, but I can see the carbon potential, I see the biodiversity potential, the ecological potential. I can see, and for some people in the regenerative space, they can see the people potential, because in a conventional sense, in a sort of a technocratic, we're just going to grow more commodity sense, people are often a bit of a pain in the ass, and I see that the families,
it's the next generation, mate.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. So this is and you know better than me. You've been in farming a long time, but the average age of the farmers is getting far. The farmers are an aging population. Who takes over those farms? Is it going to be a corporate who doesn't give a toss about what they do to the land? They only care about profits. As a cynical view, there might be not always the case, but that's the big risk we run. Or do we bring a next generation farmer on who's got a head full of ideas and probably a good bit of experience in the regenerative space, who just lacks the capital to go in and affect those ideas and turn the next generation into, families and people actually on the land. So the talent, backing the talent is I think it's a key element, and people, as you know better than anyone, Charlie, is people bring themselves to it and they connect with the land and they look after it on such a fundamental level. I know every farmer I've ever met loved his country, his or her country. And corporates don't have that necessarily, So we want people in charge of country and looking after it in that regard. So matching up capital. That's what we do is match investors with those aspiring or expand. Some of them are farming already; they're just expanding, but they just need the capital, and we match them up. And then the other part of it says that environmental factor. You've got that natural capital and the ecology, that resilience that comes with natural capital, and drought resilience and flood. Drought resilience and being able to weather the storms when they turn up. Both financially and ecologically.
And when so there's the marriage of finance, a block of land, a young couple entrepreneur. You facilitate the conversations and the transactions and the arrangements and contracts and so on. Where does your role finish, or does it sort of stay there as a guiding light, as other facilitation? Because I imagine that under your close watch, these things can come together. But then once like the young couple who aren't maybe that business savvy or good with negotiating or something, and then where does your role does it continue?
It's more and more so, yeah. Look, it hasn't always, but at this point we're seeing that, as you say, I'm a big believer in business coaching and mentoring now, because I've had that myself and I can see the benefit it has to clients, not just because I'm in that space, but I think generally having that level of accountability and oversight and sort of assistance and help fills a lot of gaps for a lot of people. And so, for that, it's important that farm is not just, we don't just want to match them up and set them off and then hope they survive. It's important for the investors and the farmers and the farm itself that the thing is flourishing and it's in itself regenerative. I mean, a part of that word regenerative is financially regenerative, so it's growing and expanding. So that's where, yes, we have that ongoing relationship and that ongoing mentoring role. That's becoming more and more important. And also the network that surrounds that. And, you know, farming, as far as I understand it, can be pretty lonely if you're out there doing it on your own. Having a bunch of like minds around you who are doing a similar thing and on the same page and you're talking the same language, you can sort of, and it doesn't, most of our guys never meet each other. It's all on Zoom nowadays. It's just kind of normal. But, you know, that network and that support creates a momentum that generally speeds up your progress in business dramatically and eliminates a lot of roadblocks and helps us challenge ourselves just inherently by being part of, it's like networking upwards, being around better people who are, you know, sort of better than us or challenge us.
And you're right. There's an isolation, not just with farming generally, often, but also in the regenerative space because you're a bit of an outlier.
You're doing something different. Yeah.
Doing something different.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that can be, you know, so there are organisations, you know, formal businesses that help that to come together, and then there's, you know, much more informal. Just you know, I know there's one organic group up at Kin, Mitch and Nina Bray, who I've interviewed on the show before. And they've got an organic group up there, and there's no formality about it. There's about a dozen of them, families, and you know, and they just sort of turn up at a farm once a month, and they just have the chat, and they find that. And I've been in part of more conventional versions of that. The most, you know, informative, sort of confidence building, empowering, and interesting forums for development.
Yeah.
No?
Like I said, that momentum that comes, and I saw this in all the coaching groups I've run over the years. It got to a point, you know, it was the insider secret in a big coaching group, say in the natural health space that we ran. People didn't have to do much other than join the group because people would end up coaching each other and the conversations and the you know, there was structure to how that worked. But I know RCS do this and Farm Owners Academy and others as well out there doing a good job with this. But we run a mastermind group there now around Cultivate that fills this role you're talking about, whereby our graduates and our people who own farms or are still trying to get onto farms, there's a momentum that happens within the group that almost propels you along without needing to do much.
Life of its own.
Yeah, it does. There's a culture there. Yeah.
That's, you're putting the culture back into agriculture.
Yeah, yeah. There you go, mate. That's a TM.
Take that, TM. I don't think I can take that one. I do. It does drop out of my gob every now and again. Fear. I just want to talk about fear. I made a note of that before. You know, how do you deal with it? You know, when your clients, you know, old and new, you know, there's a you perceive, you're aware of a fear-based decision or fear-based sort of a attitude, and how does it affect people, and how do you coach people through getting around that in a general term? There's lots of different versions of fear and how that plays out, but is there sort of any tips you can give people that you would pretend you've got all these clients listening right now? You're at a conference.
No pressure, eh?
No.
Mate, I think, you know, it probably sounds a little bit cliched, but if you really know where you're going and why you're getting there, and what your vision is, and what your why is, you know, what your purpose is, then fear and other, you know, let's call them roadblocks or bumps in the road, become a little bit less relevant. So, you know, like, that bigger picture really can drive you forward because it keeps everything contextualized, and that's on a macro level. But when it does become a genuine roadblock, this is where it becomes that emotional awareness becomes really, that we talked about earlier, I think becomes a really useful tool, is it gives us a chance to unpack what's going on with the fear. And what I mean by unpack it is to actually examine it, shine a bit of daylight on it and say, well, if what I'm scared of actually happens, what then? What would it mean? And then you come up with, well, it would mean this, you know, that would happen. And someone wouldn't talk to me or whatever, you know. Or quite often, you know, like I remember one farmer example would be, you know, if I switched from using chemicals to biologicals in a season on my cropping program on a quarter of my farm, or you know, I'll go broke.
Yeah.
You know? And then just examining that and go, well, yeah, is that actually the case? And, you know, to explain that to me, how would you go broke? And then they go into the numbers of it and sort of unpack it a bit further. They go, well, I know I might lose 20%, for example, or I might I might not get my money back on this. So, so that comes back to some more actual factual stuff rather than this big grand assumption.
Is it true?
Is it really true? Yeah. And just on a if it's an emotional thing, it's like, well, what would happen then? You say, come up with an answer. And what would that mean? What would happen then? And just bring it, really digging it out and go, well, you know what? This fear is based on a whole bunch of assumptions that actually aren't as bad. Because once I started to look at it and go, well, if I'm scared of that and it did happen, how would I deal with it? Generally, you'll have an answer. And then what happens then, I'll have an answer. So I know that makes sense, but
totally.
It just lays it out and becomes far more manageable, and it helps us. Often what's at the core of it is, an irrational kind of sense that is something calamitous would happen, which is based on, often it's just a belief system we managed to inherit from, friends, family or church or something before age 7. So, it's a child, it's the inner child screaming they're about to disappear and be attacked from a zero irrational space as an adult. And, being emotionally aware of that, you can sort of acknowledge that little part of each of us that is, 7 years old and terrified or confused or whatever, and give us a chance to go, it's okay, that's part of me that's still there, but as an adult, I can actually deal with this.
Well, it's funny you say that. I listened to a podcast some months ago about that very thing, and in those formative years, we grow. Obviously, we develop, and our personalities and the way we behave and habits and things change as we grow. And there was this fellow, I just can't remember his name or which even podcast it was, but he's saying, when those events happen, those momentous events happen, there's a persona that is captured in us at that moment, right? Our fear at that point in time, the way we behaved, the way to describe it was persona. So, summing up when you're age 4, you at age 4 is sort of captured. There's a persona that you retain. Yeah. And then when you go through life, you might be 33, and an event happens that triggers it. That persona that has been in your it's almost like an entity in a way, is there to step in that, because that's what you're designed to do.
Yeah.
This persona comes back in and goes,
this
is my, I'm still 4 though. This thing is not 4. It hasn't grown with you, and it jumps back in there in a version that we can identify. Like we might be using different language and things, but there's the core of it. It was fascinating. When adults lose their shit and they act like children. It's the persona of them at age 7 when something happened just triggered their behaviour. Yeah. It was absolutely fascinating. It made so much sense, and there's a way to sort of put that persona to bed. It's really, really interesting stuff. There's so much in this, in that that great emotion of fear. And as I said to, I might have said to you the other day, people are mean when they're scared.
Yeah, that stayed with me when you said that. I think that's very, very true. Yeah, and when we recognise it as, big strong blokes and go, hang on, I'm acting like a 7-year-old. It's kind of humbling. It was pointed out to me just a couple of days ago by my beautiful wife. Said, acting like 7-year-old. Bloody hell.
Well, you can't argue with that, can you? I mean, you can't argue with the wife anyway.
No, I managed. I did. Yeah. At the
time. And then she said, you're acting like a 4-year-old. Yeah. Tim Ferriss has a technique he calls fear setting.
Yep.
He goes, what's the worst case scenario? There's anxiety about something. Okay, let's go to the worst case scenario. What does it look like? What is the impact of that? And be really objective about it. And what can I do to mitigate against that? And how long will it take, or what will I have to do to recover from that? And that very simple, I think it's sort of 3 or 4 questions in there of, instead of goal setting, which is like, the future, I mean, this is still a future scenario potentially. But, we all think about how we're going to achieve our positive goals and scenarios in front, but then there's also we're going to have some stumbles and some challenges on the way. I think, if I can prepare for that as well with this sort of fear setting, it's a really interesting technique.
Yeah, and it gets us asking different questions, doesn't it?
Oh, totally.
And it just, because it's an interesting thing. It's what I really like about what I've seen happen in the regen world, sort of coming back to that in that space, is that the question I asked you and Charlie Massey, 4 years ago, I can ask now and I'll find a lot of answers. I can jump on Google or whatever now and I'll actually get those answers. Those things are getting filled in. The transition and the journey is getting so much more better charted territory.
More tangible.
Yeah, it is.
But in itself, that's an interesting point in itself. Like the more that something becomes more tangible and more defined, often the more conflict there'll be around that.
Very true. Yeah.
Well, what have you? But maybe you don't mention names and situations, Adam. But I mean, is there? What are you seeing in the space? Is there sort of not negatives, but there are some challenges that that are arising that you've seen develop?
Yeah. Look, I think this comes back to the initial. We talked about this off air a while back. Trying to see the regen. And again, I'm not speaking here as a farmer. I'm talking here as a business consultant, I guess, or as a coach. And I want to make that clear. But if we look at replacing industrial ag with a regenerative system, we tend to try to place it into the sort of industrial compartmentalized, there's a nail, there's a hammer hit nail kind of approach.
Yep. Is what you do.
This is the system. Whereas what you're getting at here is the better, what we love about the regenerative space and where the opportunity is to realize there is a whole new paradigm to embrace. So it's not about replacing one thing with the next, it's about shifting paradigm. There is that temptation to try and define it, but it's a bit like natural medicine. If you go to the doctor, say I ran into chronic fatigue as part of that kind of, I mentioned this sort of implosion method. Chronic fatigue was one of the ways it expressed itself, which was a really shitty thing for a big, strong bodybuilder with a strong physicality and identity around physicality to run into. It was like, literally, I'll just whip your shoot of armour that you've built over the last 20 years and take that away from you and see what's left,
That'll learn you.
Yeah, you big pussy, So what I discovered there is I go to the doctor and say, I've got this, and he'll go, well, either, have another cup of coffee in the morning and have a Panadol for your ache. It's literally that level of advice, all right? Which is not even, it's worse than useless. It's actually, makes me worse, right? So what I'm getting at here is you go to a good integrative doctor or a naturopath or someone who knows this stuff, and they go back to the biome, they go back to mindset, they go back to nutrition and environmental toxins and removing all that and then regenerating the natural biome of the body and regenerating the body's natural ability to heal. That's a replacement system, but it's a new paradigm to work from. And exactly what I see happening in the regenerative space is that the opportunity here is to not just replace a chemical with some new thing. Well, maybe there is actually. Maybe you can put a new thing in, but if the new thing, it's like me saying, I'm going to stop taking a painkiller or a drug over here to kill the pain, which is symptomatic, but I will take, let's say, a probiotic to help my body expand its own regenerative capacity and healing capacity. So maybe that's the replacement is to find that those products, methodologies, and things that can stimulate natural healing of soil and the ecology. And to that extent, there's a replacement methodology there, but the inherent paradigm that replacement is coming from is to rebuild and regenerate so that the input itself becomes basically irrelevant in time. We're trying to build nature as I do with my body. I don't want to take supplements forever. I want to get myself to a point where I'm resilient in myself.
Looking for more information to assist your regenerative journey? Come join Charlie and his guests around the kitchen table, an online community of supporters with exclusive access to the Regenerative Journey interview transcripts, live online Q&A sessions, a chance to engage with other like-minded people and more. Go to www.charliearnott.com.au/the kitchen table, and we look forward to sharing a yarn with you. Now let's get back to this week's episode.
what I'm learning, and still a student of, is that nature does have the answers. And you talk to someone like Peter Andrews, it's just the science is in the hills, is in the landscape. We can see that. We just have to open our eyes to actually understand it.
Yeah.
And that literally the medicine chest of nature is there. We're exploring that. And also, I guess, and another reflection on the parallels between regenerative ag and human health, medicine. Big pharma versus. As we've discussed in the past, you've got your human health industry, conventional, and then you've got your agriculture industry, conventional. There's lots of similarities, and one similarity is that prescription, which you just sort of mentioned then, see a nail, hit it on the head with a hammer.
Yeah.
But also what are we focusing on? We're going to focus and treat the symptom, or we're going to actually look at, well, let's step back to the core of the matter here, and that's very, human health, landscape, soil health, absolute parallel. And
I think it's only when, you go back to health. If you get recurring headaches, but every time you take a Panadol that goes away, you can't think, oh, well, I'll just keep taking Panadol.
Quick fix.
But when the headache keeps coming back, no matter how many Panadols you have, is when you start asking better questions. So when we hit crisis point in our health, that's when people go to the naturopath or the integrative doctor and they go, nothing else is working. Show me a better way.
Desperation.
So, all right. And this is an interesting one because we're seeing that doesn't seem to happen yet in Australia regularly. That's, we can still kind of ignore it a bit. That's my read on it. You might see different, but this is one of the companies I'm working with at the moment. It's called VRM Biologic, an Aussie company, if you know about them. They're not big in Australia, but they're very big overseas. And they've just secured, in the midst of all the tension going on with China politically and COVID and everything else, they've secured a massive multi-million-dollar contract with the Chinese government as a partner over there to remediate 20 million acres of farmland a year for the next number of years.
Right? That's a lot of land.
Right? Now, the reason I bring that up partly is a product placement and a bit of a plug, right? But this is what's relevant about it, is the reason the Chinese government are looking for this biological inputs is because they've hit the point where the food system's failing. That's the inside scoop, is they're going, okay, we need biologicals in here. We need a better way of doing this because the Panadol we were treating this thing with is failing, and they literally have experiencing not so much food shortages as food quality. The quality is dropping.
Yep.
So this soil is dead in so many parts. So they know that more of the same is going to give them starvation. It's literally at that stage. So that's why this is I know that from working in this company who are doing this amazing job over there, remediating soil, and replacing chemical ag because they have to. They've got to. So there's, it's a good tap on the shot. There's that feather we talked about earlier for us to go.
It's a big feather. That one.
Don't wait for the Mack truck. And
the Chinese are pretty shrewd. They're and I say that with some respect. They are thinking 100 years down the track, not one. So they're looking at food security. They are currently, they source a lot of food from overseas because they know the stuff. They can grow a lot of food over there. But as you say, it's crap. And this is interesting. It's history repeating itself because in 1924, Rudolf Steiner was asked by many German and Austrian farmers to do a talk on agriculture because the NPK system, which was, I think, I'm saying 40 years old at that point maybe, 30, 40 years old, was failing. They before that, they were, natural because there wasn't unnatural products. It was seaweed, it was charcoal, it was green crop, manuring. That was the system they were used to employing in their farms.
It was all inputs, though.
They were inputs. They were inputs, because there was not. Obviously, there was variation to where they were farming and the products they were trying to produce, but there was an input of some degree.
Yep.
And then, there was a revolution, and we could actually extract and obtain NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and we could use that to grow food because you add it. This is what the plants need. Add it to the soil and you'll get better food. Well, they grew volume.
Yep.
But over time, and there's a lift, initial lift, and then there's the slow degradation of health in the soil and the quality of food. And then these farmers said, Rudolph, we need an alternative here. And that's when that was the birth of the 9 lectures that he did, and the agriculture, the publication of that book, and the birth of biodynamics at that time. And again, so that was nearly 100 years ago, right? And then there was, I guess, the 50s, 1950s. I think it was the Green Revolution, the 50s and 60s, where it was like, I've got all this leftover chemical warfare stuff, let's turn that into fertilisers and chemicals. So that was another point in time where there was an alternative that people went a quick fix.
Yeah.
And now we're here some 50 years later, 60 years later, at another point in time, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think as a lot of us obviously waking up to is the quick fix, whether it's in medicine or in agriculture, has an addictive kind of aspect to it. Not even necessarily physically addictive, but financially addictive. You got to keep going back and buying it, and someone needs to be selling it to you to do it. Whereas in an ideal world, we want to be self-sustaining, self-regenerative.
Do we want to talk about sovereignty at this point?
Yeah.
Can we talk? Because there's sovereignty as a farmer, isn't there? I believe we reasonably have some reasonable amount of sovereignty over our farm. We're producing the fertilisers we use. I don't even like using that word. We make biodynamics basically. So we're in charge of that. We're in control of that. We're not relying on a whole lot of other people. That's quite similar to human health, isn't it? And we've already sort of touched on the sovereignty of one, and that's not just from a medicinal sovereignty. It's just like a sense of one's own, I guess, freedom and ability to make decisions and choose for their families. Yeah.
I think, mate, it's an interesting one right now. It's never been more relevant with this the medical situation we find ourselves in in the world, really, but in Australia, obviously, with the vaccination rollout and so on, is we're all being challenged and asked a question around that and we're not even getting asked to make a decision. We're getting told what to do. And whatever your choices are around that is okay, except for my money, I think we've been numbed out to the idea that we have that choice for a long time. And I think I'm saying this without trying to offend everyone, but basically over the number of years, we're just so used to the idea of go to the doctor, get a Panadol and get fixed, rather than going to a doctor. I'll give you the tip. Right? I've worked with a lot of doctors over the years. They are almost forced by the system to practice what we would end up calling 7-minute medicine. Yep. What's wrong with you, Charlie? Yeah, tell us your symptoms. Right, here's your pill. See you later, mate.
I've got a pill for that.
Yeah. Rather than you come in and say, oh, look, I've got a bit of heart pain, carrying too much weight, or whatever's going on. And let's look at your system. Let's look at your history. Let's look at your diet. Let's go into things and spend some time together. I used to work with doctors who spend half an hour with patients or more time with patients that actually did that sort of higher level, more in-depth work with their patients. And they didn't charge them anymore for it, but got penalised by Medicare for it. Yeah. They got red flagged.
They weren't turning over enough.
They weren't doing the turnover, right? So literally the system works against them. So, systemically we've been battered about the head long enough as a culture, as a nation, just to believe that, if you got a problem, there should be a quick fix for it. And, whether it be medical or anything else. And, convenience drives everything. And the idea of critical thinking, think for yourself and, dive a bit deeper, be curious and ask your own questions and explore ways that you can regenerate your own health or that it's not a popular thing any longer. It's just not.
It's not encouraged.
It's not encouraged. No, it's not on a systemic level or even just on a cultural level.
It's often seen as a nuisance.
Yeah.
These people asking questions.
Yeah.
And that's. I say that for myself from a farming perspective as well. But certainly, I don't go to the doctor much, or similar practitioners. But I imagine again, when it comes down to turnover, time in my office and spent an ease of prescription, that can be a real nuisance.
Yeah, and this is, and again, I see it in farming. I mean, I get agronomists up here to ask questions, and they go, well, you just use this, that, and the other, and fix it. And I go, yeah, but I don't want to just fix it. I want to replenish it and rebuild it. So, that, and they're not popular questions, as you say. It's you get laughed at and you get ostracized, and it's like, I feel like I'm stupid asking the question.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this doesn't make sense what you're telling me. And so, sovereignty right now, for my money, Charlie, I think we have given it away so cheaply. We have given away that right to make questions. And this is not a judgment on anyone's medical choices. It's simply that we're not collectively as a nation saying we have a right to choose what we do. We have a right to, look, for me personally, my view is when the government starts telling me with as much vigour as they tell me to get a vaccine or wear a mask, to tell me go and build your immune system up and be as healthy as you can, stay positive, don't be fearful, you'll get through this. Yeah. If that message comes through and there was genuine health tips that were positive, that would actually make a difference to the majority of people, I'll listen to the other stuff with equal. But right now I'm deeply sceptical and a bit sad how quickly we've rolled over on that one personally. I think we're, very... It doesn't remind me of that Australia I grew up believing we were as a sovereign nation who goes out to fight for our sovereignty and all that kind of thing. I think we're on a very slippery slope there. It
seems, I mean, as you just mentioned, I would love to hear that message on mainstream media or anyone or coming out of a politician's mouth. I did have a little chuckle the other day. There was a photo. I saw it a couple of times, different versions of the health ministers from around the world. Have you seen that?
They're not a healthy looking lot, are they?
Oh, my God. Yeah. These people are making decisions. There are some sort of at state levels and there are some at national levels. And to think that they are the health ministers, I mean, there's lots of sort of analogies or parallels I could draw there, but I won't because they're pretty hardcore.
It wasn't pretty. Yeah.
No, it was absolutely. It was
least healthy group I've seen for a long time. Yeah.
Well, I mean, which is really, I guess, reflective of their attitudes. Like, let's not talk about physical fitness or building resilience or our diet. It's about you might look like shit and you might, but you'll be alive. We'll get you to tomorrow, and it's going to cost you, but that's fine because we've done our job because we'll catch you alive. It's like, no, but you're not giving me life. You're not prescribing a life for me.
And it's 100%. So, and it's we've got to recognise the health system, the way we talk about it, is the sickness industry. That is what it's built on. It's about avoiding and dealing. Not even avoiding. It's about dealing with and treating sicknesses.
Well, there's no money in health.
No, there's not. And I say that, look, the industry I'm talking about here has kept my dad alive, touch wood, with for the last 7 years through amazing surgery and intervention and all that. So I'm deeply grateful, and I genuinely. But in terms of treating, chronic diseases and things that aren't as simple, more mechanical solutions, it's just not as well suited as the best voices in natural health that build about building immunity, building natural immunity, and enhancing that. We don't hear those voices out there in mainstream media at all, and yet that's the one thing we should be hearing. So when I hear that balance, and I don't think we will, but when I hear that, I'll be personally convinced that I'll start listening to the advice. In the meantime, all I'm hearing out there at the moment is dogma. It's this is the only fix, or it's not. And I'm deeply sceptical at the moment.
It's pretty short term too. When I understand, you hear people talking about, well, you'll get one vaccination, and you'll get the next one. It was going to be like 3 months down the track, and that's all sped up to 3 weeks in some cases, I think. And then they're talking about boosters, which is a relatively new thing, not a new concept, but new to the conversation. And it's interesting, I imagine that some of the conversations that are going around at the moment are, I thought I was right with 2. I've got to have another one now, And I don't know. I just trust that people start again, asking more questions. I mean, even if it's just as a parent. We talked about you won't do it for you, you might do it for your kids, and maybe this is a pretty contemporary scenario or version of that, isn't it? It's like, as a parent, are we asking the right questions?
Well, mate, I know as a parent, I'm with you, and I think be curious is all I'm getting at. There's no right and wrong here necessarily, other than if it's something this big, and it has there's serious implications either way around this. But this is not a sugar pill we're being asked to take. It's and it's so asking questions and understanding what is really going on with that, I think, is pretty crucial. The big furphy here is the answers aren't being offered in mainstream media, and there is a lot of censorship going on in. I got friends who around the world in your business, Charlie, doing podcasts who are being censored for conversations like this. Literally, they're being taken off the air by big tech, by the powers that be. So, you've got to dig a bit deeper and ask questions in different places, and you need to go off. Maybe go to Telegram and into DuckDuckGo instead of Google and Facebook and whatever. Asking right questions, you get some different answers. It gives you all the information to consider. I think that's the most important thing we can be doing right now, because otherwise, as I say again, you got to follow the money, mate. Who's making the money on this? Who's got the liability on it? Who's got the risk?
Who's benefiting from the current narrative?
Yeah.
And I don't know it's necessarily, the people who are, being let out of lockdown now, because I saw interesting bits the other day. There was a cartoon, and there was a fella it was a cartoon character. He was in a cage, right? And the door's open to the cage, and he's running out going, yeah, but he's just running into a bigger cage. Yeah. Like he has that sense of freedom, but he's just run into just a bigger version of what he was already in. I think it was pretty telling. The future is going to play out, and I guess that gets back to, for me and conversations we've had, Adam, about okay, well, we don't know what the future is going to be. We don't know what whether it's mandates or expectations or legislation or whatever, we don't know what it's going to be. The questions we are asking ourselves now is, well, what can we do to, what do we want our future to look like, and what do we have to do now to start formulating that? Whether it's education, whether it's the food we have access to, whether it's the health we have access to, whether it's the people we engage with. There's been certainly in my lifetime, a time where I've had to consider the changes that are taking place. We may never get back to what it used to be, and what a glorious life that was. But you know what? You got to remember this: we don't want to go back to pre-COVID life, because pre-COVID life gave us COVID. That paradigm actually eventuated into this, and that was And so my view is, as you just said, it's about actually let's go and create something new. Let's use this as the opportunity to build critical thinking into our daily lives again. Let's use this opportunity to say, well, is this education system for my kids what I actually want, or can we do something better? Is this health system that's being offered to me, these dichotomy, yes or no, black and white health choices, or not even lack of choice, what I actually choose, or is it just being foisted upon me? And I completely get that they're not easy questions to ask. And, there's I know a lot of people losing their jobs, and, we're losing half our teaching staff at school very shortly. There's a lot of major disruption, and there's also a lot of people who are having major health problems as a result of, the medicines they're being forced to take. So I think, mate, when you go back to sovereignty, this is the thing. I think we've got it really soft. Right? I lost 3 great uncles in the World War II, and both of my grandfathers fought. We get asked to speak up and lose
friggin' likes on social media, and people shy away from it. Who gives a fuck? Like really, who gives a fuck?
Our perspective is very much different. I know, three great uncles.
Yeah.
My grandfather he joined the light horse when he was 15, turned 16 on the way over there with his horse and saddle.
Yeah.
I did not know my ass from my head when I was 15, 16.
Right, exactly. So we're not asked to do anything like that, but we have been conditioned. And I think social media is a good example. And I'm not saying I'm not guilty of this either, but we shut up for the sake of not upsetting anyone and not causing any dissent or having someone sling mud at us or whatever. And yet that's what do we lose in that? And we go back to that thing about fear. What are we really losing by speaking up? Like I know people who've been severely injured with vaccines. They've had a vaccine. This is not everyone, I know that. But there's people who've been hospitalised. Yeah. I had a woman on the phone last night who had me in tears telling her story. And she's got myocarditis and she's been told she's got 5 years to live. All right? And she's been ostracised, and marriage has broken down and ostracised. And she said, but my doctor won't speak up and no one wants to listen to me. And
you said her cardiologist actually said he confirmed. Is that right?
Yeah. He said the bloody hospital's full of people with the same thing going on. So, and I'm not saying that for fear-mongering, but it's just that story, it's not in the mainstream media, which it needs to be. It needs to be right there next to how many COVID cases got diagnosed this week or today. That's right. So that needs to be equally presented, all right? So we've got informed choice, and it's not being. So we need to recognise that.
We need to see the full scoreboard, not half.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. But the other part of it is she got told, she goes to church, she said, and her pastor, she told her pastor, she was religious, and she went there and said to the pastor, look, this is what's happened to me. And, I want to speak up in church and let other people know, because I want to let others know about this so nothing happens to them.
Yeah.
And before they vaccinate their kids with it, And just so we know, so we can make those measured, evaluated choices, informed choice. And the reaction was, the pastor said, no, don't tell anyone, because that might stop them getting it too. I mean, so that's what we're living under, that level of social censorship. We're censoring the shit out of each other. And that disturbs me deeply.
A man of the cloth.
Yeah. So my invitation to anyone who's on board with this, and this, regardless of what your viewpoint is, see, right now it's okay to speak up pro-vax, but if you have doubts about it, you get shut down and not allowed to talk about it.
Smart, yeah.
I mean, we'll cop shit for this, I've no doubt. You more than me, because I get to escape. You're the man in the firing line.
Well, I talked about this in the opening episode of season 4, and and again, it's more about asking questions. Just putting it out there, going, oh well, what about this and what about that? That's the way I view it. I think that's healthy. And whether it's asking questions to you, an agronomist, about what I should or shouldn't put on my crop, or different techniques, or to a health practitioner about what they think I should be doing. That's, again, that comes down to it's a healthy viewpoint.
Yeah, it is, and that's let's sort of go back for me personally. I guess I've had those hard lessons in life where I ignored the feather, ignored the tap on the shoulder, and I waited for the Mack truck to get me. And I just hope we wake up to our own sovereignty before, we get hooked on a endless cycle of bloody boosters or whatever is coming for us, and we go, no, this is actually not what we signed up for, And we can ask questions, and we don't have to be embarrassed to ask, and we've got the courage to ask, or at least express dissent if needed. And yeah, we might lose friends and we might piss our families off or whatever, but you know what? If it's a life and death situation, or even if it's simply, this is something that I'm putting into my body, you got that right to ask.
Well, that's true. It should, either way, you do, you don't. It's your choice.
Yeah.
For some, it is, it should be a choice at the end of the day for anyone. Whatever side of the fence you sit on, I think it would be not unreasonable to suggest that that remains the choice of that person. I have a real problem with coercion. I'm lucky I'm my own boss, and I'm not working in an industry or a business or situation where there's any coercion or threats to my what I do tomorrow.
Yeah.
But for those, I just cannot imagine the stress and the strain and the choice that someone has to make. That's that for that someone have to make that choice. I can't imagine the strain that would be on them and their marriage and their financially or whatever or socially. It's just not comfortable with the fact that we're even. This conversation is something that's live.
It's a tough one, mate. It really is.
Really tough.
Yeah, I'm the same. I know a lot of friends who've had to roll over and do this against their will, and because of financial reasons and otherwise. And I get it, But you know what? This is something I've noticed, and one thing that's really attracted me to this regen space is, I think you identified earlier, is that majority of people in the regenerative movement have the ability and have the experience of speaking up and doing something different, that goes against the grain of their community or what's always been done, or even against their families in a lot of cases. Like Dad did it this way, but I'm going to do it differently. I know you've had a similar thing there. And there's a lot of courage in that. There is a lot of courage in the regenerative movement to try something new, and to speak up and be different and, risk ostracization and being ostracized and all those things. So there is courage out there. There is sovereignty out there. Regen's proof of it. And farmers out there on that front edge are doing it, and that's, and it's there's shades of grey. Like we say, in regeneration, it doesn't mean you 100% don't use any chemical, and it doesn't mean you're 100% one way or another. It means there is a philosophy and a paradigm around it which allows for curiosity, allows for dissent, and it allows for, finding different points of view and exploring where the truth lies.
Mate, that's a pretty good place. We're looking at the time there, mate. 2 and a bit hours. Have you got chickens to feed, or we better wrap it up pretty soon, mate? I have a number of other questions for you, which I'm going to do separately because we've got a group, a Patreon group, platform around the kitchen table, and I've started asking my guests some separate questions offline or in a different audio, mate. It's exclusive for them. We go even deeper and deeper.
That's why we keep all the good stuff.
We do. That's it. That's a great teaser. Yeah. I don't have to sort of prime you up for that one. You just came right out. Mate, I've got to say that was fascinating. And even though I know a lot of your story, it's really refreshing to hear, not so much from beginning to end, because it certainly hasn't ended, but certainly the trajectory that your life has gone on, and the decisions you've made, or the choices and those turning points and tension events. That's I trust our listeners have got a lot out of that. And this is the beauty of, and it's very landmark, isn't it? It's that Socratean forum. Someone gets up and talks, and even though the topic might be, not their interest or their journey, but it's like there are things that they can see reflected in that story that they can take home and digest and learn from. So that's the whole idea about this show, mate.
I would full kudos to you. Like I said, it was meeting you early on was a big turning point for me in terms of your courage and your outspokenness in the regenerative movement. Opened a lot of doors for me personally and helped put me in this turning point pathway opened up, and there we go. And so thank you for that, and I'm sure for many others who are listening now, it's what you're doing. So that full kudos to you for paving the way for others to make the decision.
Well, mate, thank you. I really appreciate that. I find it easy when there's so many good stories, pioneers, settlers, explorers out there doing wonderful things, and all I do is sort of facilitate those stories to come to light. So, and as we have today, hopefully. Mate, we better finish this one. I will jump on you for another quick one for our other Patreon mob. Anyone wants to join up Patreon, go to our website, charliearnott.com.au. Get on board, because it's extra special stuff from Adam you're going to hear if you jump on straight after this episode. Right, mate, let's wrap it up. Been a pleasure.
Thanks,
sitting
Charlie.
here, Binnaburra, lovely part of the world, and we'll continue this conversation offline.
Look forward to it.
And next week's episode on the regenerative journey is with John Farris, the I was going to say the lead drummer, the only drummer, the drummer for In Excess. I sat with Johnny recently on his farm in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales, and what a fascinating chat and what a wonderful life of regeneration and renewal. So I hope you enjoy next week's episode of the Regenerative Johnny. It is Regenerative Johnny, the Regenerative Journey with John Farris.
This podcast is produced by Rhys Jones at Jaeger Media. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe, share, rate and review. For more episode information, please head over to www.charliearnott.com.au.